Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year, as I say. Welcome to the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. You've got the agenda in front of you, I hope. The only slight change I wanted to make was to the running order, because we've had some interesting pre-application information on the Ada Bliss site. I thought we should move that to just before the applications to be considered. So we're thinking about all the proposals, although in that case it is a pre-application, not a formal application at this stage. We've got apologies from Chris Wardle, Chris Collinson and Carol Craven, as I understand it. Nobody else? Okay, late items, I don't have any. I'm not aware of any late items. So, declarations of interest, anyone? No? Okay, thank you for that. So we'll move on to item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting. Hopefully you've all had the chance to review those, and I assume you're content with those. Everybody happy? Yeah? Seconder? Okay, thank you. As I say, we're moving the Ada Bliss site on a bit. So applications determined since the last meeting. You've had those for information. Any comments? No? Okay. And the application's not being considered this time. You've had that list too, so hopefully that's all clear. So that takes us on to the pre-application submission that's been made for the former Ada Bliss site on City Road. So as I say, the point really was to get this to the committee fairly early. So the team are working on this with a view to working up a full planning application in due course. As I understand it, there isn't a heritage assessment or heritage statement as yet, and that's in progress and coming, but you obviously haven't had the benefit of seeing that because it's not available yet. But what you have got are some proposals, emerging proposals, so we thought it'd be useful to get an early view from the committee on those, and then feedback to the team so they can take that into account as they work things up. So Chloe, if you're happy to take us through those proposals, please. We can invite some comments. Thanks.
Yes, of course. So you'll have seen the covering report requesting pre-application advice. Attached to that, there are 3 appendices which give a summary, looks at the plans. There are some visuals and some floor plans. Obviously, as you all know, it's a prominent industrial building and site within Little Chester Conservation Area and in the buffer zone of the Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site, and obviously near to Grade 2 Handyside Bridge and 2 scheduled ancient monuments. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few photographs for reference, really. Then run through the appendices, but obviously you've all had these and have digested them, so I won't dwell too much on this unless obviously you wish me to go into any specific detail. So obviously the first one was an aerial view along City Road, the other over the river looking towards the rear of the site, which faces the river. Obviously, you're all aware of the prominence of the Haslam's Foundry elevation fronting the green. Some further photographs looking at the openings and specifically looking at that wall and that brick return which faces the car park. So, as I said, I've got those for reference. At the other end, you can see the modern extension that's existing, that's built off the front elevation. Also, the size and scale of Unauthorized Gardens, left-hand side of the top photograph, and the photograph of inside the main building. I'll come back to that one. So this is the information that you've been sent. So you'll have seen the summary of information and why you're being asked for comments, brief site history. As mentioned, a full heritage statement of significance and a heritage impact assessment is being developed at the moment, is being progressed and worked up. They run through the heritage assets nearby. They talk about the flood risk and the need to elevate development 1.5 metres above ground level, and some background. Obviously, they go through the considerations which they've taken, they've looked into in terms of converting the existing building. Obviously, there's the housing need, and this proposal is for housing and some commercial units, as well as some open space. There has been some consultation undertaken. Then the document takes us through the different elements of the proposal. So firstly, they talk about the apartments, which are relatively low rise, about 4 stories in height, with the northern block, Block A, slightly lower. So those 3 blocks which face the river, and they're linked by podium decks at first floor level. There's obviously undercroft parking and electric vehicle charging infrastructure, etc., and secure bike cycle stores within that undercroft area. Those properties are flat roofed with brick parapets. Then there's the proposals for the southern houses, which are adjacent to Unauthorized Gardens. So they're 2 and 3 stories proposed. And then there are houses against the facade, the main retained risk facade, and the options which they've looked at. So obviously one they looked at was separating the houses from the wall and leave the wall freestanding in the front. But that wasn't something that they pursued. I think they were persuaded not to, and to look at something which actually connected to the wall itself. So the proposal is to separate the houses from the wall by approximately 2 metres and to create a raised access walkway just below sill level of the windows, and to add a glazed part of the roof along that element. And so there's a covered arcade to which the front doors of the new terraced houses will open onto. Then there's the commercial units, and they're mainly located to the northern part of the site. The information discusses how the acute angle of the retained wall was quite a challenge to look at what could be constructed. So they are proposing that this remains an open area, with some steel roof trusses and structural columns being retained there to reflect the former layout of the main foundry building. And the bricked up windows to the north elevation, which we saw on some of those photographs, they propose to reopen and appropriately screen. They're also looking at murals on the inside of that retained wall. So obviously much more detail, and then they move on to the choice of materials, and they've specifically looked at a number of different methods of construction, and the facing material predominantly being brick. You'll have all seen the proposed plan online and layout. And the visuals, which have been supplied in an elevated position, looking down upon the site. So once again, an aerial view of that main range and the development behind. The visual of the southern end and the development adjacent, as well as the brick. And I'm not going to run through them all, as I'm sure you will have seen them. But there are a number of elevations and plans submitted. So I'll just go through down to one of the last ones. So obviously elevation facing the car park, bottom slide of that slide. And I'm just going to finish on the elevation shown for the block that runs adjacent to the wall itself. So you'll have seen the layout in terms of the entrances adjacent to this glazed link behind the wall, and the dwellings behind. And to the top of that slide, you'll have seen this is the row of housing and the elevation that is within that glazed linked area. And the bottom two slide, that's the elevation onto the courtyard. As you can see, there's interpretation also being suggested as part of this pre-app. We've also been sent, and I've been asked to mention this plan. It came in only just today, so it wasn't part of the information that you received a link to. But this shows 3 sections through the site, from the green on the right-hand side through the site. And the red dotted line shows the current massing, scale and massing and height of the current buildings on the site. And that's it.
Thanks, Chloe. So this is the long, sadly neglected building at the western edge of Chester Green. It's good to see this being considered seriously now. The scheme involves the demolition of most of the buildings, well, all of the buildings on the site, with the exception of the retention of the main facade facing Chester Green, and the bit that goes round the corner where that nice little acute angle is at the top at the north. So in essence, that is to be retained, but everything else is to be new development. So the run of townhouses you can see behind the existing arched opening wall are set behind effectively an arcade, so a glass roof, so a covered area there to their front doors. And then there are some townhouses to the south, and the rest is apartments, with the exception of some commercial units to the north. So apartments at the back with undercroft parking. So as I say, this has been brought to the advisory committee early so that you take account of some initial views. So thoughts, please. David.
I like it. It's a huge advance on previous applications, and it seems to make a really good use of the site without being too obtrusive, and not too sort of overcomplicated. I think that's quite good. It'd be nice to see a bit more detail on the buildings once that detailed application comes through, but in general, I think it's a good idea. I like the idea of the little open area. Perhaps a small playground could be incorporated in that.
At the northern end, behind the wall.
Yeah. That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a very imaginative attempt to do something that is actually really, really difficult. And I think some commercial developers could learn from what's been attempted here, particularly in relation to how you deal with that large wall. I think 74, I think it is, accommodation into the city is really, really to be welcome because it's badly needed. And I agree with David about the little courtyard at the north end. And I would have thought if they're going to do commercial developments on the bottom, perhaps a little cafe, and that could be an area for people to sit and have a coffee and a bun. I assume it will get sufficient natural light. It's a very tall wall, but I think in the summer it'll be a nice little spot. So all in all, I think it's a really good idea. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just out of interest, what is the nature of those commercial units, Chloe? I'm not sure. Take the point about cafe and some community use.
They mention a number of things: cafe, florist, hairdresser, that kind of
possibilities.
niche type of things.
Yes, that's right. A number of things are mentioned within the information regarding commercial units. So yes, it does talk about easternmost unit is envisaged as a cafe, coffee shop with external seating area, which could be accessed. But apart from that, specific, they talk about looking at, there's a strong demand from a range of independent businesses, as has already been mentioned, for the remaining units, and as has been mentioned, florists, hairdressers, specialist retail, creative industry, workspace, or small offices, etc.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Paul at the back there.
Chair, yeah, I think there are lots of very good things going on with this scheme, and I'm quite excited by it. I think the gradation of the brickwork from ground up to the higher level, I think, is a clever device. I like the Noid Island idea of the open space. I think it's really good. And I also quite like the idea of this glazed space between the two buildings. More detail, I think, will bring that to the fore, and I think it could be quite an exciting space. The lighting in that space for evening time, to get light coming from the building through the semicircular glazed windows, I think would be really quite spectacular. I have a few concerns about the pattern of fenestration. There is no seeming relationship between the semicircular windows and the inner elevation, which I think ought to be looked at very carefully. they may have very good justification for not doing that, but I'd like to see some better relationship between the two. Similarly, and these drawings don't actually show it terribly well because they lack shadow, but on the 3D image of the rear, it shows it better, and I think it's developing in the right direction, but I think the fenestration on the rear ought to be a little bit more subtle in its industrial context. Perhaps even the roofscape as well. There are elements of pitched roof in there, and there are elements of flat roof. And I can see the balance, but at the moment the flat roofs tend to balance, take the precedence over the pitched. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Max?
I'm interested in the west elevation because the fact that this is in the World Heritage Site doesn't seem to have been given much weight. The riverfront, in any other context, would be quite pleasant and acceptable, but in this context, I think needs a rethink. It needs to be exceptionally good rather than just quite good. The other thing that occurred to me was that I didn't quite get how much parking there was. It's nothing to do with us in a way, but they have a problem round there, and if there's enough room for everybody who has a house to have a parking place, that's fine, but otherwise the locals are going to be up in arms.
Yeah, I haven't checked that. It looks like there's parking for each individual townhouse.
It's not in our remit, really,
but
Mr. Chairman.
no,
I only slits through it in.
And the apartments parking is essentially Undercroft. So I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure on the numbers, but I take the point about the riverside elevation. I mean, it will be quite visible when viewed from the west. Thank you. Any other comments, Ian? That's as detailed as it's going to be. Yeah, I mean, maybe able to zoom in. Could you?
And that's the main feature of this design, and I think that needs to be really worked through carefully, because if you're not careful, like Paul was saying, if the windows don't fall in the right position, you could be forever looking at a brick wall. I mean, okay, you can raise roof over it and light down it, but I think that's it's a major part of the design, and it really needs bottoming before you get too far down the line with it. How you're going to use that space, whether it's going to be practical from a daylight point of view, and whether you're actually going to be able to use it for anything.
I mean, I think there are some practical considerations to be thought about there, because essentially it's an open arcade, I think, in their mind. So birds will fly in there, and it's open to the elements at, I think, both ends and maybe halfway along. But practical consideration. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
My concern, probably not a conservation one too much, but it concerns that wall. It's the management of when people have moved in here. There's going to be something that isn't the road in front of them. It's not going to be their private garden. Whose responsibility will that be to maintain? Will it be individuals, or will there be an overriding association or something that looks after it? It's going to be gloomy, isn't it? You've got houses facing a wall behind which are trees, and it's facing more or less north, so there's not going to be a huge amount of sunlight in there. And I can't help feeling if you lived there, you'd have your lights on all day, and we shouldn't really be looking at houses where everybody has electric lights on all day unless there's some sort of solar panels, and there doesn't seem to be anything like that taken care of at this stage. Probably that'll all come out in the wash at some point or other.
I think that comment relates to the treatment of the elevation behind that existing wall, which looks like it has very few windows in it.
Yeah, one thing I'm not clear about is whether the original openings, are they to be glazed or unglazed? And if they are glazed, is the glazing going to be clear or opaque as it is at the moment?
I think my reading of it is that they are to be glazed, except there seems to be one right in the middle, halfway along, that looks like that might be left open, but I'm not entirely sure. Chloe, do you know?
There is an existing doorway that drops down to
Right in the
ground
middle,
level in the middle. So, yeah, but obviously the walkway will go 1.5 metres above the pavement level at that point. So there's be some sort of balustrading across there.
Exactly.
But yeah, I would hope that space would be not fully glazed and not opaque glazed, so you can actually get some vitality and contact between the green and the building itself. But like Ian was saying, I think that 2.5 metres is not a vast space between the two. The relationship between the facade and the face of the building is very, very important. Is it not Derby Homes that are going to be managing this?
It's the councillor behind the
registered
application.
provider or the city, but yes, essentially it's
I thought so. So
affordable
there will be
housing.
management in place then, Robin.
So the management should be taken care of. There is one slightly ironic aspect to this, and that's the fact that we're having to raise everything 1.5 metres behind the new flood wall. So I think that's just that's another conversation, isn't it? But
Well, it is, yeah, Chair, but they do say it's a just-in-case scenario.
Sorry?
They do say it's a just-in-case scenario.
Yeah.
It's somewhat alarming that they're predicting that the brand new flood defences are going to get overtopped. I mean, it makes you wonder why all that money was spent on them in the first place.
Yeah, indeed. As I say, that's probably a conversation for another time. But
I appreciate it's nothing to do with this committee, but it's just an observation.
Okay, any other comments around the room? Okay, I'll do my best to summarise, Lindsay, then. So I think there's a general consensus that we welcome the fact that something's happening, and this is potentially an exciting proposal. The retention of the principal facade is to be welcomed, including the arcade, although there are some reservations about that in practical terms, which we've highlighted. I think there seems to be a consensus that the northern end with the courtyard and the open space could become quite an interesting, characterful aspect to the scheme, particularly with a strong relationship to a cafe or community use as part of the commercial offer. I think the glazed arcade potentially is attractive, but more could be made of the main elevation behind that wall, ensuring that the fenestration in the new wall behind aligns with existing openings and is more generous. There are some concerns about the western aspect and the prominence from the riverside, and indeed the impact on the World Heritage Site. So there's quite an expanse of potentially quite unremarkable elevations with lots of flat roofs. So that we think needs to be considered. And I think some concerns, again, practical management, maintenance concerns about that arcade and how that's if that's going to become a defining feature of the scheme, that needs to be treated well in the first place and then looked after thereafter. So I think there's a support from the committee and encouragement to work things up with those comments in mind. Lindsay, thank you.
No objection.
Hmm?
Is it no objection?
That's a no objection. Let me just get the wording right. No objection, subject to the careful consideration to the western aspect. So principally the apartment blocks, the 3 apartment blocks that sit in the middle, that have the potential to be overbearing and impact adversely on the World Heritage Site. So that needs consideration. So we need to raise that as part of this pre-app response. But because that's taken as a whole, we'll say it's all couched in terms of no objection to the principle.
I think, Chair, as it's not actually an application, we
Exactly.
don't need to say we're objecting or not objecting.
Yeah, that's true. We don't even have to say that.
We're just advising at this stage.
That's true. We don't have to say because it's a pre-app. So
Okay.
we'll be much more definitive when we get an application in front of us. Thank you for that. That takes us on then to items to be considered. Applications to be considered, I should say. So taking these in order then, the first one, Chloe, if you would, is Dove Cottage at 728 The Hollow, Micklover. Grade 2 listed. Thank you.
Right, yes, as mentioned, this is 7 and 8, The Hollow in Micklover, Grade 2 listed, within the Micklover Conservation Area. The photograph on the slide shows the original cottage, which has been extended to the right-hand side. And you can see that in the brickwork. There's a number of things proposed. In terms of the floor plans, you can see a number of those. The existing floor plans on the left, and to the centre of the slide is the proposed. So to the front elevation, there's a proposal to block up the door, which is on the photograph, which is far left. And in the information, that's to remove the door and its frame and block up with brick. It is noted that it's not actually shown on the existing plan. Sorry, yes, it's not shown on the existing plan. The other proposals on this elevation is to replace the modern bordered door to the centre of the photograph with a replacement beam moulded door and frame. So that's the top left. And there's joinery details on how they're proposing to tackle that door. In terms of the door to the rear into the extension, the photograph that you will have seen online shows a boarded door with a modern boarded door with a small window light in the centre. The proposal is to replace that door, also a modern one, with a stable type door with the light as shown bottom right. In terms of the rear elevation, there's obviously I've mentioned the rear back door. There's also the removal of the modern conservatory, which you can see in the photographs, converting a window in the newer part of the building to a pair of French doors. The removal and blocking up of 2 doors and 1 window, as well as rendering the rear elevation. But you can see there's painted brick on and around the existing window as shown. Here's details of the French doors, which you'll have seen online, and photographs of the inside of these doors, which are being proposed to be locked. So yes, it's the removal of blocking up of those two doors and window. And that's it in summary.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, so this is the removal of a 1980s conservatory, some blocking up carefully, hopefully, blocking up of windows and doors to the rear, some replacement of modern boarded doors with something more traditional, and the opening up of a window to create some French doors. So comments, please.
Could I just ask Chloe, are you satisfied now that you've been given all the information? I noticed from correspondence you'd had with the applicants that you'd asked for further information. I wasn't quite clear whether you'd received it and relevant photographs.
I did have some questions on the original submission and asked for some clarification, and you'll have seen the letter online which goes through the points which I made, and obviously they responded on that. So that gives a sort of a response to the questions that I had, useful in terms of the reconfiguration of the rear extension, etc. There have been changes to the design of the proposed new doors to replace one to another. The only thing I think that maybe hasn't been addressed is the blocking up of the original front door, and I think I wondered whether it's possible to leave the door in situ and just block up on the inside. So, and then there was one on the rendering. Their response to because, the reasoning, they're trying to give it, obviously a justification, saying that they propose to render because it's not visible from the front of the property. So, yeah.
I mean, I should say that the drawings are not really to the standard we would expect in terms of the elevations, at least. But let's focus on the proposal. Paul, you had a comment?
Joe, the blocking up of the doorway, the existing doorway, I take on board your comment, Chloe, about actually trying to retain the original door and blocking up on the inside. It might be more appropriate just to recess the brickwork 15 millimetres back, just so you've got the expression of the original opening there. And the other point is that the whole of the rear elevation is to be rendered. I worry about things like that because the brickwork, the existing brickwork, will be keyed, scotched to be keyed, which damages it beyond redemption for if that render is taken off to a later date. Would it not be better if it was just painted with a quality masonry paint, breathable masonry paint, rather than rendered?
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd just like to endorse everything Paul said.
Okay, anyone else? So is that an objection, or is this objection subject to conditions, perhaps?
Is it something that can be addressed to the officers?
Chair, I think it's something that the officers can
You
deal with quite
you can
adequately.
Yeah.
You can sort out, Chloe.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so I think the concerns are, notwithstanding the fairly scant information that we've been provided with, in thinking about blocking up former openings, the reading of the original historic openings would be good to see. So there are ways to do that in terms of setting back brickwork within an existing opening, and some concerns expressed about the rendering, and alternatives have been suggested. So the committee are suggesting that these matters get dealt with through further discussions with Chloe, Conservation Officer.
So is that no objection?
It's no objection subject to that ongoing discussion.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on to Middleton House. Back on again.
This is Middleton House, Grade 2 listed building within the city centre conservation area on St Mary's Gate. Former Technical College annex, dated 1912 in the listing description. And as you can see within the application, the proposal is to clean all elevations. Photos of the front elevation have been submitted, along with a methodology which mentions the use of an acid and a hot pressure wash. So I'll just run through the photographs with you. There's little justification or narrative within the application documents, and the photographs are here, and obviously one can see some darkening of the coins and the stonework to the building. So here are here's the information that's been submitted. Obviously looking up St Mary's Gate, there's the other building on the opposite side also listed, which the former Cathedral Quarter Hotel, which also has a pattern of age and in terms of the stonework. If you noticed on one of the photographs I showed you, this application has come about because some cleaning was undertaken without discussion at the corner of the building. I'll just show you where that was. So, photograph on the right to the bottom, and we asked them to submit an application because we wanted to find out what method they'd used, because it does seem to have slightly, taken away the face of the stone. In terms of the method statement, so number one, it states that all elevations will be cleaned. Photographs show the front elevation, but beyond that it's not clear whether the side and rear elevations are to be. It's stated that no works are being undertaken to change, alter any of the existing fabric, and this application is simple washing the external walls to get rid of dirt pollution. Therefore, a breakdown of the history of the building is not necessary, so that's the reasoning for not submitting a heritage statement. And the method statement itself, I'm sure you've all seen that on online, and I've got a copy of it here in case there's a need for any further details during your discussions on it. And I think other to say that the trial that was carried out in these photographs was said to be a media blasting to the clean stone with no chemicals, just water and fine glass particles. But there are a number of different methods. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's essentially an application for facade cleaning. So I think we should focus on A, whether you feel it is in need of cleaning, would benefit from cleaning, and B, so kind of the principle of that, and then we ought to think about if that's accepted, the methodology. So any comments? Paul, thank you.
Yeah. My opinion as an architect is that this building does not actually need cleaning, and certainly not in the manner that they've done the trial pattern on it. If it is cleaned, I think we'll be facing, well, if it's done properly with a DOF system or something like that, then we may stand a chance. But my concern is that the cleaning of that building will expose weakness in the mortar and between the joints, which is a very fine joint, and then we'll be faced with the prospect of having that building repointed, which will actually change the character quite significantly. As it stands, it's watertight, it's sound, and it has that patina of age and a build-up of surface protection that I don't think would benefit the building by removing it.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. It strikes me that it was, it's just over a century old, and it's aged fairly gracefully, and it should be left well alone.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so that's an objection. I think there's an objection to the principle of cleaning the building in the first place, and I think I would just add that the methodology that's proposed does appear to be aggressive too. So there's talk of acid and so on in there. So that's an objection on that basis. Okay.
I have to admit, I didn't realise you needed permission to clean a building. I mean, how old does it? I mean, if somebody had cleaned it in 1920 and then 1930 and 1940, is it because it's a listed building that you can't then clean it without?
Well, because it's a listed building, obviously, it's also, guidance from Historic England state that you shouldn't really clean the building unless there's justification or if you're undertaking repairs to the building. Obviously, in this case, there isn't repairs needed to the frontage, and actually there's a risk of damage to the fabric. So, anyway, yeah, obviously, we asked them for an application in this case because the corner had been cleaned rather aggressively.
I mean, the cathedral was cleaned in 1970 something like that. Yes, and I can envisage that building, Middleton House, being cleaned, and the others all, we better do the same. North Parade did that. It had a lot of steam engine grime on it. All right, I'm waffling a bit, but I'm trying to get my head around telling people not to clean their houses. It's strange to me, but I accept the advice.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is land to the rear of Burley Mews, 100 to 102 Friargate. Thanks, Chloe.
Okay, you'll all know this very fine number of buildings on Friargate. and you can see its specific location. We're talking about 100, but to the right-hand side of the photograph is 99, Grade 2 star listed building, which has got 7 bays, and then number 100 with the 4 bays in the centre, and the building to the left of the photograph isn't statutory listed, all located within the Frygate Conservation Area. Obviously, I'm sure many of you will be able to talk about this in a lot more detail. In the listing description, both 100 and number 99 are dated mid-18th century. Within the application, some additional information has been submitted since it was originally came in, which included an updated heritage statement with some historic maps to show the historic plot and boundary, and some amended information regarding the rear elevation and photographs. So obviously the historic maps from 1852 and 1882 show the property. So we've got number 99 here and number 100 in this location. Obviously doesn't clearly show on this map the boundaries. The 1882, obviously you can see the non-listed building, and you can see where that arrow is pointed to, the line to the rear of number 100, which shows the boundary between that building and the one next to it at 102, 101, 102. Put this elevation, this aerial view in just to show the current arrangement in terms of car parking and the buildings. So number 100 is this one, and 99 is this building, and obviously this proposal is for development on this side of the boundary, and the other, which is at a lower level. Some photographs, obviously, that you'll have seen within the information online, which shows the area where this studio apartment block for 6 studio apartments is proposed. The lower area is proposed to be parking, and then ground floor living area and shower room, and first floor gallery bedroom. So on the photographs to the top of your slide, 2 stories are proposed and running along the boundary in this location. Here's views to the rear of number 99 to the bottom left and centre, views of the rear of 100 bottom right, and then onto the boundary wall between the 2 properties. It is a modern boundary wall with modern rail above it, but you can see in these photographs the differing levels and the views both from adjacent properties and number 100 in the centre. The view bottom right is the view from number 99, the main building, I guess, on the corner to where the proposal is, which is in this location. So you'll have seen this site plan on site showing the arrangement. Also see the elevations and plans and the useful sections showing what's proposed. Elevations, this is the new information, elevation showing the proposal in situ adjacent to the properties. There it is on the first. And facing west, looking at it with the backdrop of the new building that runs along Stafford Street. Obviously, there is a Georgian group letter that's been submitted, and I'm sure you will have seen that. Just to clarify, on the new building, the proposal is for a structure which is of facing brickwork and slate, and that's the summary.
Thanks, Chloe. So this is a new build development of 6 small studios that kind of bridge the change in levels and retaining wall to create a split level arrangement. Comments, please. Max.
There's 2 issues here that have I think are worth making. One is, which we've made endlessly for 40 years or so, is that to infill on the gardens of houses in Friargate is basically something we should avoid at all costs, although we've been overruled on numerous occasions. And I think in principle it's something we should still try and promote, because they are residential houses in an important conservation area, even though a lot of them are not in residential use anymore. And the other thing is that although it's an appealing design, I think it seriously affects the setting of the listed buildings, the rear elevations of which are just as important as the facades, and especially Belmont House number 99, which is a house of outstanding merit, and crowding its rear elevation, compromised though it's been over the last 150 years, is something that we should be avoided at all costs.
I echo the thoughts of Max. I think the design of the building is okay, but its scale and location in relation to the rear facades actually detracts from the listed buildings, which is what we're here to judge.
I just think we're talking about harm to the conservation area and harm to the setting of listed buildings.
The Cosy Club. Illuminated sign, yeah, Chloe, thank you.
As you know, this is the former Royal Hotel, 1 to 8 Victoria Street, which also includes 22 and 23 Corn Market. Grade 2 listed building in the city centre conservation area. Proposal is for an internally illuminated sign, and as you can see, as you'll have seen online, it's being proposed near the corner, but onto Corn Market elevation, and there are individual letters on a aluminium box section support, which is powder coated in a matte finish to match the stone facade. And from that aluminium box section, there are fixings to the specific letters spelling out Cosy Club. So powder-coated metal individual light box letters with gold finish surrounds, as mentioned, internally illuminated. And there's a proposed spotlight at the bottom, but also being proposed. Obviously, the proposal is contrary to the shopfront and advertisement guide, which Derby City Council has.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. So I guess a large prominent illuminated sign on the corner of this distinguished building. So the letters, I think, are about 1/2 metre by 1/2 metre each. So comments, please.
I think I'm right in saying that...
Sorry,
I'll
come to you, David, very soon. Thank you.
I think it's horrid. It's massive and obtrusive, and I object to it, Chair.
Thank you. I think as a committee there's always been an objection to illuminated signs per se anyway.
Yes, internally. Yeah, that's what I was
Internally illuminated. Yeah, David.
Well, I was going to point out the policy of the committee has always been not to allow internally illuminated signs within the conservation area. But I also agree with Mike that it's just massive, overbearing and quite unnecessary.
Thank you.
Once again, it's going to cause harm to the listed building and harm to the conservation area.
Okay, anybody else? No, thank you. So that's a clear objection and recommendation for refusal on the grounds that the committee will always object to internally illuminated signs, and we believe this will have cause harm to the listed building and have an adverse impact on the conservation area. So that takes us on to the next one, the last one. 1 Midland Road. Chloe, thank you.
Right, this is 1 Midland Road, Grade 2 listed building in the Railway Conservation Area. The listing description dates it at approximately 1853. There has been a number of previous applications regarding this building, and it came to this committee in January 2020. At that point, it was for the retention of change of use of public house to 2 commercial units at ground floor and 4 apartments on first and second floor. The committee had no objection to the proposals at that point, to those applications. So this application is for the same as previously submitted. So in terms of they still intend to implement the previous permission in terms of the reinstatement of timber vertical sliding sash windows to the rear elevation and the removal of suspended ceilings to the first floor. In addition to that, they're proposing the removal of a modern stair between the ground and first floor, and to install a new stair to the first, from ground to first floor. So, and obviously reinstatement to the floor where the modern stair has been then removed. Just to be clear, this proposal does retain the main central circular stair. There's no change proposed regarding to that, and under a condition of the previous permission, there were some repairs undertaken and some consolidation works of that, but this application doesn't seek to use that stair other than the landings on the first floor. At ground floor, it has been already long gone and has been removed. So just running through very briefly, there's also a slight change to the elevation in terms of the shop front, just to accommodate now that the main door and the window to the left-hand side being an entrance to a lobby that goes then up a new staircase to the first floor. And there's some vinyl applied stickers being proposed on many of the windows on the ground floor. So, as mentioned, here are the floor plans. So most of the changes on the ground floor is in relation to the so existing on the left-hand side, proposed on the right as usual. So there's a proposed removal of a modern stair which extends from ground to first floor. Here's the circular stair which survives from first floor up to second floor, but doesn't survive at ground floor level. The changes on the ground floor are relatively minor. There are what seems to be some slight changes in terms of removal of wall to that circular feature, and obviously that staircase. And everything else was as was permitted previously on the approved application before. Here's some photographs just showing you the bar and the setup as existing. On the first floor, obviously, as you can see, as you've seen online, the removal of that staircase creates, the proposal is to create, once that's removed, a sort of larger, a shower room in that location, and one can see the proposed staircase coming along here. There's no, as mentioned, there's no proposals to alter the main staircase nor to use it, and it will be blocked off, so there's no access up to second floor up that stair. There's other minor walls. It does noted on the plan that the unauthorised suspended ceilings are still going to be removed as previously included on the previous application and approved. Here's some photographs of the first floor and that ceiling which is set to be removed. Second floor, the different units and how they're proposed to use that space. This is identical to the approved scheme. I've just included these just to remind you of the spaces involved and the staircase, etc. But nothing's proposed up there. This is the first floor plan showing the floor to be removed and the floor to be reinstated where the modern stair is being installed, and some sections through. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Listed building has had many alterations, it seems, over time. There was previously approved reinstatement of the corner door and removal of suspended ceilings, so that's still proposed now. A proposed shop on the ground floor with access to one apartment above accessed from the front, and I think another from the rear. The application also seeks to remove a modern stair going from ground to first and install a new stair, but retain the central circular stair and lantern above, albeit it doesn't appear to be, won't be used as a stair as such. Comments, please. Max.
It may already have, as it's been subject to a previous consent. I presume we can do nothing to save the two little Italian windows on the extreme left of the elevation on London Road. I think to remove them just to produce a shop front is a very retrograde step, because it's really quite a they're an integral part of the overall flavour of the building.
Just be clear, was that previously approved, Chloe?
Yes, it was previously approved.
Is that-
It was a reinstatement of a lost shop front that's shown in on the historic photographs.
Are you saying that there was a shop front there originally?
Yes.
In that case, which means the two little arched windows are in modern reproductions. In that case, I withdraw that objection. The other thing, I'd welcome the reinstatement of the entrance on the angle, but I think we ought to make sure that it's not going to be a Kentucky door, because I saw a curved fanlight. I trust that is over the door and not integral with it. And if it is over the door, a Georgian-style one would probably not be that appropriate. We'd probably want a plate glass one.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? No?
Chair, I don't really have an objection, but I think it's regrettable that this circular staircase can't be incorporated into the new
I agree
scheme.
with you.
But presumably there are practical reasons for that, but it does seem a shame. But having lost the lower portion of it, I suppose it doesn't function as well as it did.
Yeah. Okay. If there are no other comments, then I'm taking that as no objection, but subject to further discussion, Chloe, with yourself, to do with the reinstatement of the corner door and attention to detail there. And I think we're all, hoping there's a better way of using that central circular stair as part of the scheme. But no doubt there are some constraints here. But I think a further discussion would be helpful if you're able to have that. But essentially, no objection. Okay, that brings us to the end of the items on the agenda. So, unless there's any other business or comments around the room, I'll call the meeting to a close. And thank you very much. See you next time.